Breaking news, we're learning former senior advisor to Secretary of State Pompeo, named Michael McKinley, who was resigned last week, will join the ranks of something we've been covering all hour, the people testifying this week in the impeachment probe, and it is coming fast. He will face the House on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the Trump White House has been trying to keep the whole lid from blowing off, the Ukraine scandal unraveling before our eyes, more and more aides coming forward. The strategy is Stonewall. In fact, in a letter to Congress, the White House says the entire probe is basically, quote, baseless, unconstitutional, and thus they see no legal or governmental obligation to participate in it. Trump's own administration, though, is divided. Look at these different responses from the budget chief and, as we were mentioning, the defense secretary.
The OMB has been subpoenaed. Have you responded yet?
No, yesterday's letter speaks for itself. We will continue to not participate in this process.
We will do everything we can to cooperate with the Congress. Just in the last week or two, my general counsel sent out a note, as we typically do in these situations, to ensure documents are retained.
Is that a yes?
That's a yes.
You will comply with the subpoena?
We will do everything we can to comply.
I'm joined by former acting Solicitor General Neil Katyal, who's faced the Supreme Court dozens of times and is back for opening arguments. Nice to see you. What do you think about what we're learning here and topped by this breaking news that people really are coming forward despite everything I just outlined that the White House is up to?
Yeah, I mean, the White House is up to, you called it a stone wall. It's more than that. I mean, it's like an avalanche wall. It's just like the complete, utter resistance to getting the truth out. And it started with trying to suppress the whistleblower report back, months ago, and has continued so that they have said, for example, Ambassador Sondland can't testify, Fiona Hill can't testify, former Ambassador Yovanovitch can't testify, all these people, and now they are defying those refusals to testify, and they're going in and following the subpoenas. And, Mr. McKinley is just the latest in that list of people, and these are public servants, and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, which is give the truth to the American people and our elected representatives in Congress.
Yeah, I also want to get your views on the really huge development of Rudy Giuliani being under federal investigation. You obviously have worked at Main Justice. You know how sensitive it is when they deal with certain high-profile individuals, certainly with the former prosecutor. Not that they're immune, but it's not something I think they take up lightly. So I'm curious of your views, given we've been covering that tonight, and also something that just crossed the wire. So it's not confirmed by NBC News, but it's credible reporting from the Wall Street Journal, and I'm going to read it to you, Neil, since I know you haven't had a chance to prep with it. But it says, headline, federal prosecutors scrutinize Giuliani's Ukraine business dealings finances, and says that this is a probe of his dealings with Ukraine, that they're reviewing, quote, Mr. Giuliani's finances, meetings and work for a city mayor there, which gets into this whole government question of was there illegal foreign representation. And it says, quote, investigators have examined Giuliani's bank records. Again, I'm going to repeat our coverage. Giuliani has said he's not aware of the probe and denies any wrongdoing. Your thoughts on all of the above?
Well, Ari, I guess my real profound reaction here is just one of sadness. I'm not one of these partisan blood sport people who's happy when the other team's guy goes down or gal goes down. Rudy Giuliani was a legendary figure at the Justice Department and did so much good for the country in all sorts of ways. And to see this is, I don't know the word for it, but sad, really just tragic. I think the investigation will unfold. It's obviously tougher to investigate in many ways an attorney than others. Here, he might not have been only acting as an attorney. He might have been acting in other ways. So I suspect this investigation is going to take some time. But I don't think it should distract from the main question facing the American people right now, which is, did Donald Trump go and seek help from a foreign power to benefit his own campaign? Giuliani is still only a sideshow in that. And what the president is doing is he's trying.
Let me press you on that, Neil, for us to understand. Is he a sideshow, or is he, according to the White House call notes, the person outside of government who was being invoked by the president as the agent of this plot?
Right. I should have said Giuliani's criminal liability is the sideshow.
Whether or not he's
Giuliani
charged.
is a conduit, to be sure, and part of the story. Though, if I were in the House and impeaching and looking at impeachment, I wouldn't need Giuliani. I've got the president's own words in the July 25th phone call and so many other things, including the whistleblower report. So I don't think you need Giuliani. But I think what the president is banking on through his Stonewall strategy is to try and run out the clock and hope that he can tie this up and say, I'm not going to follow the subpoenas. I'm not going to turn over evidence. I'm not going to turn over witnesses. They wrote his White House counsel wrote a ridiculous 8-page memo last week, which I call the crayon memo, because I think that's the depth of the legal arguments there, saying they don't have to turn anything over. And there was one president who tried that before. His name was Richard Nixon, and he went down in flames. And I suspect the same thing will happen here if this president does this.
Neil Katyal, with a lot of context for us, and I think a reminder, I really appreciate what you said, that while there may be justice or accountability here, we don't know all the facts, you take no personal joy in it, which I think is something for us all to reflect on. I also want to, in addition to thank you, Neil, remind everyone you can go to Opening Arguments on MSNBC. That's msnbc.com/opening arguments, and see this tonight and all other Neil breakdowns. I find them to be quite elucidating. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.